If you've made it this far, then maybe, just maybe, this story found a home in your heart. But I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I read everyone, and it always amazes me how far a simple story can travel. And if this one touched you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. A brand new story awaits you tomorrow, one that might just change the way you see love, loss, and second chances. See you there. The rain had started just after midnight, not heavy, but steady, like the sky was exhaling quietly. In the small town of Maplewood, where streetlights flickered and sidewalks cracked from years of wear, the world felt still. The temperature had dipped to 50 degrees, and the mist hung low like a blanket pulled gently over the town. Grace Miller, 26 years old and running on little more than caffeine and stubbornness, had just finished her double shift at the diner. She didn't have a car, and tonight she didn't even have enough cash for a ride. The 2-mile walk home stretched ahead of her like a quiet reminder of how alone she was. She wrapped her faded hoodie tighter around her and sipped the lukewarm coffee she had saved, a small comfort against the chill. It had cost her $3, a splurge on her usual budget, but she needed something warm to carry her through the night. As Grace cut through the park to shave off a few minutes, she noticed something strange. One of the benches, usually empty at this hour, was occupied. A man sat there, completely still, wearing a soaked black suit that clung to him like a second skin. Rain traced the lines of his face, dripping from his hair and collar, pooling in his shoes. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't even lift his head. He looked like grief carved into stone. Grace wasn't the kind of person to interfere. She knew what it felt like to sit in silence, to want the world to pass you by. But something about this man, the way sorrow clung to him like a second shadow, made her pause. She stopped walking, looked down at her coffee, then back at him. Without saying a word, she approached the bench, not too close, and placed the coffee cup on the empty space beside him. "It's not hot anymore," she said gently, "but it's better than rainwater." She didn't expect him to respond. She didn't ask if he was okay. She just turned and began to walk away. Then, just as her footsteps began to fade, his voice, low, rough, and raw, broke the silence. "I didn't think strangers could still be kind." Grace didn't turn around. Her voice was soft, almost carried away by the rain. "People you know don't usually need to be," she replied. She kept walking, the sound of the rain swallowing the rest of the night, never realizing that the man she left behind wasn't just some lost soul. His name was Ethan Blake, 34, a tech mogul worth millions. Hours earlier, he had stood beneath a flower arch, waiting for a bride who never came. But tonight, none of that mattered. What did matter was a cup of lukewarm coffee placed by a stranger's hand, a gesture so small, so ordinary, it might have been forgotten in a bigger life. But for Ethan, it was everything. And for Grace, it was the beginning of a story she hadn't yet realized she was a part of. 3 days had passed since that rainy night in the park, since Grace left a coffee cup beside a stranger without expecting anything in return. She hadn't thought about it much since. People came and went in her world, and kindness was something you gave without hoping it had come back. But what she didn't know was that the man on that bench, the one soaked to the bone and carved from grief, hadn't stopped thinking about her. Ethan Blake had disappeared from headlines, from boardrooms, from the life where everything came, with a price tag. After being left at the altar and watching his empire grow colder than the champagne waiting in crystal flutes, he had taken one bag, emptied his wallet of everything but an old photo, and walked away. He didn't want to be Ethan Blake, the CEO, the groom, the name people whispered when talking about Silicon Valley legends. He wanted to feel real again, human. The coffee cup Grace had left behind became a strange kind of anchor, so he followed. That's how, On a foggy Thursday morning, he showed up at Annie's Diner, a place that smelled like burnt toast and survival. He wore faded jeans, a flannel shirt, and shoes that had seen too many rainy sidewalks. Grace was behind the counter, hair pulled back, apron stained with syrup. When the bell above the door jingled, she looked up and froze. It was him. The man, from the bench. "Can I help you?" she asked, cautiously. "I'm looking for work," he said. His voice was hoarse but steady. "Anything. Dishes, cleaning, whatever you've got." The owner, a gruff man in his 60s named Hank, didn't even look up from the register. "No ID, no address, no job," he muttered. Grace hesitated, then stepped forward. "He's got nothing," she said, her voice firmer than she expected, "which means he'll work harder than anyone with everything." Hank looked at her like she'd lost her mind, but something in her stare, quiet, steady, made him pause. He nodded slowly. "Trial. 1 week. No pay." Ethan didn't flinch. He simply said, "Thank you," and rolled up his sleeves. Over the next few days, he did every task no one wanted. He scrubbed grease traps, hauled trash, washed dishes until his hands turned raw. He didn't complain, didn't speak much, but Grace noticed things. How he folded the rags precisely, how he always stood just out of her way, how he brewed fresh coffee every morning before anyone else arrived. He never asked her why she left him that cup of coffee. She never asked what broke him. But in those quiet early hours, when the diner was still dark and the only sounds were the hum of the fridge and the whisper of a mop across tile, something between them began to shift. Not loudly, not fast, but real. And somewhere deep inside Ethan, beneath the layers of wealth, betrayal, and regret, something finally stirred. Not everything had to be rebuilt with money. Some things could start again with just a clean plate, a second chance. And the girl who didn't walk away. By the end of the trial week, no one questioned whether Ethan belonged at the diner. He didn't just earn the job, he earned respect. Even Hank, who barely spoke more than 10 words a day, started leaving fresh towels by the sink before Ethan arrived. Grace had stopped asking questions too. Something about the quiet rhythm of Ethan's presence made things feel lighter. They never talked about the rain-soaked night in the park. They didn't have to. Then, one Saturday afternoon, everything changed. The diner was packed, louder than usual. Silverware clattered, conversations overlapped, the espresso machine hissed constantly. Grace was handling the front counter, tired but smiling. Ethan was bussing tables like always, blending into the background. That's how he liked it. Until the door swung open and a group of women walked in, dressed like they'd just stepped out of a fashion magazine. Designer heels, handbags worth more than Grace made in a month, perfume trailing behind them like smoke. They didn't look like they belonged there, and they weren't here for the coffee. One of them, a blonde with striking red lipstick, froze, a mid-step, eyes locked on Ethan, her brows lifted, lips curling into something between amusement and disbelief. "Oh my God," she whispered, pulling out her phone. "That's Ethan Blake, right? Tell me that's not him." Grace, still wiping down the counter, didn't catch it. But Ethan did. His body stiffened. He stepped back instinctively, face turning away from the light. He looked like a man who'd been hit without warning. The blonde kept talking, snapping a quick photo and typing furiously. Within minutes, her post was online. Heartbroken billionaire turned dishwasher. This town just got a whole lot more interesting. The internet worked fast. Too fast. By the time Grace's coworker handed her the phone, the post had already been shared hundreds of times. She stared at the screen. The picture was clear. Ethan, in the background, rag in hand, expression blank. She didn't say anything, just looked up. Ethan stood frozen, still gripping a tray. His eyes met hers. And in that moment, All the quiet mornings, the coffee cups left for her before sunrise, the silent moments that felt almost like peace, they cracked, not because of who he was, but because of what he didn't say. That night, after the diner closed and the last stool was flipped, Grace found him in the back kitchen, folding towels like nothing had happened. She walked in, slow, quiet. "I should have told you," he said before she could speak. "I didn't mean to lie. I needed to disappear. You were the one thing I didn't expect." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble. "You said you weren't clean because of your past. I understood that. What I don't understand is why, when I finally trusted you, you didn't trust me back." She placed her apron on the counter and turned away. No yelling, no scene, just a door that closed behind her, soft, but final. And for the first time since he lost everything, Ethan didn't chase after what was walking away. The fallout hit harder than Ethan expected. By the next morning, his face was everywhere again. News sites, gossip blogs, finance threads. Not as the CEO of a tech empire. Not as the man once dubbed America's golden boy. No. This time, he was just the guy who traded a penthouse for a mop and a name tag. But Ethan didn't care about the headlines. He cared that Grace was gone. She didn't return to work the next day. No calls, no texts. Her locker sat untouched, apron folded neatly on top. And with every hour that passed, Ethan felt like he was unraveling again, except slower this time, because now he knew exactly what he was losing. 3 days later, the storm took another turn. Vanessa Cole walked into his office without warning. Ethan hadn't stepped foot in that building since he disappeared, but after Grace left, he returned briefly to tie up legal loose ends. Close out contracts, move his shares, stay out of the spotlight. His corner office still smelled like leather and ambition. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, overlooking a city that had once belonged to him. He didn't expect to see her walk through the door. Vanessa looked the same, immaculate, icy, and dangerous in heels. Her voice was as smooth as ever. "We have unfinished business," she said, dropping a phone on his desk. The screen lit up with a photo. Ethan and Grace at the diner, mid-laugh, her hand on his arm. It looked like a candid wedding portrait. Ethan didn't react. "Is this the part where you blackmail me?" Vanessa smiled, not sweetly. "If you don't come back to me, at least publicly, I'll make sure she goes down with you. I've got the story ready to go. Billionaire seduced by a broke waitress. You know how the media eats that up." Ethan stood slowly, fists clenched. "You always knew how to play dirty. But this isn't business. This is her life." "And you gave it to me," Vanessa said coldly. "You gave me everything I needed the second you lied to that girl." He didn't respond, because deep down, she wasn't wrong. Veronica left, but not before delivering one last warning. "I don't stop once I start." And she meant it. By the end of the week, whispers had started. Anonymous tips, fake stories, shady interviews. Grace hadn't even returned to town, but her name was already circling online like bait in dark water. Ethan knew he had two choices: protect the girl who never asked for anything, or stay silent and let the machine devour her. He chose the first. With one phone call, he shut it all down, pulled PR strings, issued statements, spoke to lawyers, declared full responsibility for the misunderstanding. But even with the narrative cleaned up, one truth remained. Grace was still gone. And this time, she didn't just walk away from him. She walked away from a world she never asked to enter. Now Ethan stood alone, no suit, no cameras, just a man, looking at a city that never forgives and wondering, what do you do when the only thing worth protecting no longer believes you can? A month passed. The media storm around Ethan Blake faded, just like every other headline that burned too bright too fast. Vanessa Cole had vanished from the news cycle entirely. No press conferences, No red carpets, no statements. Rumors swirled about frozen accounts and legal trouble, but Ethan didn't care to follow it. He had nothing left to prove, no company to defend, no image to uphold. He only cared about the girl who never asked for anything, yet gave him everything. Grace. She was gone. Not just from the diner, not just from the city, but gone without a trace. No note, no goodbye, just silence. Until one crisp autumn morning, a receipt showed up in a final batch of forwarded mail. It was from a small seaside bookstore 70 miles away. Handwritten at the bottom were 6 words: morning shift manager available after 9:01 a.m. That's all Ethan needed. He left the city behind, traded glass towers and boardrooms for back roads and salt air. The drive was long, winding, quiet. No traffic, no phone calls, just the rhythm of tires on pavement and the weight of everything he hadn't said. The bookstore sat at the edge of a cobbled path, its paint faded by ocean breeze and time. A wooden sign above the door read, "Next chapter." It felt right. When Ethan stepped inside, the bell above the door gave a soft chime. The place smelled like old books and fresh coffee. Sunlight spilled through the windows, warm and gold, like something sacred. Grace was behind the counter. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp, just looked up and saw him standing there in a worn canvas jacket and scuffed boots, holding a small bouquet of daisies and a paper coffee cup. "Coffee," he said quietly, setting it down. "The kind you like, not too strong. A little orange, peel." I remembered. Still, she said nothing. "I didn't come here for forgiveness," he continued. "I just wanted to see you smile again, even if I'm not the reason anymore." There was no music, no dramatic lights, just 2 people standing between shelves of forgotten stories, surrounded by silence, and something that felt a lot like peace. Grace reached into the drawer and pulled out an old notebook, its cover creased, pages yellowed. She slid it across the counter to him. Written on the front in her handwriting were the words, "Leave your trust. Reclaim what was never lost." Ethan held the notebook like it was something sacred. Their eyes met, not with the fire of lovers or the ache of the broken, but with something steadier, real. And though no one said the words out loud, the question hung between them, unspoken but understood. Can we begin again? Not for the past, not for the pain, but for the quiet, ordinary love we found in between. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with fireworks. Sometimes they begin with a coffee cup, left on a rainy bench, and end right where they were always meant to. If you're still here, thank you for listening to a story that wasn't about perfection, but about presence, about the moments we don't post online, about the quiet ways love can enter our lives when we least expect it. Now I want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city, your country, or even just a heart in the comments below. I love seeing how far a simple story can travel and how many lives it can touch along the way. But more than that, did this story stir something in you? Have you ever let someone go, only to realize later that what you lost wasn't a person, but the version of yourself you finally trusted to love? Or maybe you've been Grace or Ethan. Let us know. Let others know. Sometimes your comment becomes someone else's comfort. And if this chapter found a place in your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. A brand new story arrives tomorrow, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Because the best stories aren't always fiction. Sometimes they're just reminders that kindness still matters.